Not enough 4K. Yo, what is happening, guys? How are you doing? Welcome back to Rule of Two Review. Yes, we clearly need to discuss all this hubbub and hullabaloo that's been happening on the internet the past 24 hours about this idea of Nintendo upgrading or updating the Nintendo Switch, which is not in and of itself a brand new idea or theory. And then also this concept about some tweets from somebody who has made some accurate predictions in the past, somebody who I actually know very well as well, about Nintendo actually planning on doing this really soon, as in 2019 or even early 2019, and it's supposed to be 4K, and it's going to do all these things, and then the tweets were removed, and it's just, there's a whole bunch going on, so I want to dive into this a little bit. So, yeah. Upgrading the Nintendo Switch. Like I was just alluding to, this is not a new conversation. This had been discussed for quite a long time. A lot of people had theorized that because Nintendo has done similar things like this in the past, or because Sony and Microsoft have also done it in this current generation, that eventually it might make sense for Nintendo to perform some kind of upgrade on the Nintendo Switch. That could happen in a couple of ways. They could do a Nintendo Switch Mini, they could do a new Nintendo Switch, or they could even do a Nintendo Switch Pro. That's kind of the pseudo name that's been kind of given to this very idea, because of course Sony did that with the PlayStation 4. They created a PlayStation 4 Pro, which has now sort of become the standard base model that you hear a lot of people discuss when they discuss the PS4. The Nintendo Switch comes out kind of halfway through this generation. The PS4 and Xbox One had been going for a couple of years. Suddenly Nintendo moves on from the Wii U into their next machine, now the Nintendo Switch, just last year. And while it's an incredible machine, one of my favorite consoles of all time, definitely my favorite of the current three, it's also a situation where, because of what it does, being a hybrid portable home console, it clearly doesn't have the same capable level of power and graphics, and, you know, just like the horsepower under the hood, doesn't quite match what the PS4 and Xbox One are capable of, and so, well, Nintendo's done this in the past with the 3DS, would they do the same thing with the Switch? Now, the quick background as to why this has been a conversation the last day or so, I'm sure most of you guys have already been aware of this, so I don't really need to spend too much time on it, but there is a really well-known personality on Twitter who definitely has broken some scoops in the past. He's been wrong about some things, but he's also been right about some things many times. Like I said, somebody who I also know and have spoken with behind the scenes a little bit as well. And he put up a tweet the night before yesterday, basically stating, okay, Nintendo's going to release a new Nintendo Switch. It's going to be an upgraded Pro version in 2019. It's, you know, he had some specs, and it's going to also up-res to 4K. That was one of the big things. And then, of course, part of that was his claim that also, it might be something where it's so much more powerful than the current Nintendo Switch that a lot of third-party games that might get ported over to it might only be able to run on the upgraded version. They're not going to be able to run on the current Switch that we all know and love and have, and that's going to be sort of what Nintendo's game plan is going forward. Now, this sent a lot of ripples through the YouTube space and the Twitter space. A lot of people, good friends of mine and other YouTubers, of course, have made videos about this. Super Metal Dave ended up even joining a Review Tech USA live stream to discuss it, because a lot of people said this is false and this is fake and garbage. Per Schneider from IGN called the tweet out. This person deleted the tweet, but before the tweet had gone up, Super Metal Dave had also said something beforehand, sort of insinuating, I've known something like this is going to happen for a couple of months now, and so they did the live stream, and him and Rich basically said they have reason to believe that there could be some truth to this, and it's been crazy. It's been insane. When it first happened as a tweet, I was like, well, that's crazy. I don't know that I believe this, but okay, you know, he's gotten stuff right in the past, and I guess we'll just see. I didn't even think anything of it. But then yesterday, it just went nuts. Everyone was talking about it. So that's basically what happened to sort of kick this off. I wanted to now go into my ideas and theories of, first, I don't know that I really believe this, but it's also definitely not impossible, and so I wanted to kind of discuss how I think Nintendo could and should upgrade the Switch, and also how I think that they shouldn't do it. So first, starting off on like my base opinions and idea on this theory, just the idea of Nintendo upgrading the Switch. Is it going to happen? Should it happen? Do I believe this? Do I not believe this? So again, I'm friends with the person who put this tweet out, and I don't think that it's a crazy tweet, But I will say that, surface level right off the bat, I don't really initially believe exactly what he's saying. I just don't, it just doesn't feel right. It doesn't sound right. I mean, Nintendo moving into 4K at some point will probably happen for sure, and that seemed to be the biggest base of his claims, is that it's not going to be a 4K capable machine, but it would be something that could scale up to 4K, so games wouldn't be natively 4K, they would just be made to look good in 4K, apparently. And then, of course, the whole thing about exclusive third-party stuff just for that newer Switch. And, I don't really believe that. It just doesn't feel like it's necessarily true. And like I said, for the last year, people have been talking about upgrading the Switch, making a Pro or a Switch Mini or whatever. And, I guess I'm of two minds of that idea. I feel like eventually Nintendo will probably do something like that, especially if the PS5 or the next Xbox come out sooner than we're thinking, and the Switch is only 2 or 3 years old at the time. Nintendo's obviously not going to be moving on to the Switch 2, so I feel like, and I've said this before, they're going to have some kind of answer for the next generation from Sony and Microsoft. They're just going to have to. The same Switch, as great as it is, and as awesome as the sales are not going to be able to keep up with what's going on if Sony and Microsoft move forward and Nintendo does nothing based on the Switch. So I think that eventually they're going to do something. What I don't really think, though, is that it's anything that's in our current purview of gaming and of Nintendo's business model and of what the Switch is. I don't think it's anything that anyone should be putting any sort of thought into right now, because I feel like if Nintendo's going to upgrade the Switch, it's going to be 2 or 3 years from now. I mean, I really, truly think that. Now, if they do a Switch Mini or a new Nintendo Switch with a minor power upgrade, I could maybe see that happening a little bit sooner than that. Because we have to remember, just a Switch Mini, or even a new Nintendo Switch similar to the new 3DS, I don't think would be so different from the current Nintendo Switch that it would feel like a significant jump up and something that would adversely affect the library and suddenly make, okay, well, Red Dead Redemption 2 or the Resident Evil 2 remake couldn't run on this Switch, but a new Nintendo Switch or a Switch Mini, suddenly those games could run. I don't really believe that. I think it would have to be more in line with, I think, what we think of when we think of a Switch Pro. To me, just my sort of dissecting here, a Switch Pro feels and sounds like a significant jump over the current Switch. A new Switch or a Switch Mini to me is much, much more minor of a step, and so not anything that I think would make a significant impact to the current Switch or its library. But what I do have to say is, at the end of the day, there is a huge part of me that believes, yeah, Nintendo might eventually try to upgrade the current Switch before they move on to the Switch 2, or whatever successor console, next generation console they're making after the Switch. They will probably make some sort of jump or leap over what this Switch does. Whether it's a Mini, a New, or a Pro, they're gonna do something eventually. So yeah, I do ultimately believe that. Which means this person's tweet might have some truth to it, and we'll just have to see how that plays out if that's what actually happens. And it's gonna make things pretty interesting if it does. Now, a lot of people have been having conversations over the last year, and especially in the last day or so with all of this information, over what they expect Nintendo to do, or what they want Nintendo to do, how they would like Nintendo to upgrade the abilities of the Nintendo Switch. And there's one main thing people have talked about, and I've thought about it as well, and it's really the thing that made me want to have this conversation and make this video, because it's not something I want or desire or I think would ever make sense. And the whole crux of the thing comes down to, if what Nintendo would be doing is upgrading the dock for the Switch and making the dock something that adds so much extra capability and power and possibilities to the Nintendo Switch when it's docked, that a whole new array of things are suddenly possible for the Nintendo Switch. It can achieve so much more, and that's going to be the difference between not playing Resident Evil 2 Remake and playing the Resident Evil 2 Remake. Just upgrade the dock, Nintendo. That's all we need. If you do that and make it something that adds so much power, then that's going to solve a lot of the problems, and a lot of people will be happy. And a lot of people have said, hey, I'll be happy, Nintendo, if you just make a super powerful dock. And here's the thing. Personally, I hate that idea. I don't like it. I don't think it makes sense. I don't think Nintendo would ever do it. I also think it sounds like something incredibly difficult to do. Of course, most of you guys who've been following me for a while, you know I'm not a tech dude. I don't get or understand a lot of the technical specifications and all these different garbagey things that people talk about when you're making consoles or PC or whatever. That's not me. I don't pretend to be that person. However, what I will say is I feel pretty confident in this one thing that I personally believe, and that is that what it would take to make a dock for the Nintendo Switch that adds so much power to it that it could be the difference between a game running or not running on the Nintendo Switch. I feel like that would be really hard and really expensive to do, because as we learned more about the Switch before it launched, I thought the dock was the key. I thought it was all about the dock, and the dock was the power of the machine, because I still had that Wii U sort of mentality where that's where the hardware was located, not in the screen in your hand. But clearly that is not the case. The Switch is not the dock. The Switch is this. So again, not tech savvy, but what I do understand as a non-tech savvy dude is that the graphics, the computer, the GPU, the CPU, the RAM, the everything that makes up a video game unit and device and what it does is in here. It's not in that dock. That dock is like a pass-through, right? I mean, you guys who know this stuff better than me can correct me. But if it's as true as I'm laying it out here, that to me means what it would take to make a dock add graphics and graphics cards and all those different things that aren't in here. They'd have to put it inside of the dock, and the fact that that dock would make Red Dead Redemption 2 possible, whereas it's not possible here, to me, seems like it would be something so insanely expensive and cumbersome and awkward that I don't know why Nintendo could do it. And for all I know, it might not even actually be possible. Because the way I picture that is like, well, you have your GPU and your CPU and your RAM in the Switch, and then you have another GPU and another CPU and more RAM in the dock, and you just put the two together like a Voltron sort of robot, and now it can play better stuff on the TV? I mean, is that what that would be doing? Because that's the way I picture it in my brain. And so it just seems like it's impossible. But since I'm not the tech-savvy guy, let's pretend I'm wrong and that is possible. So let me explore the other option where I'm not correct in my theory. Let's say that is a possibility, and Nintendo was going to release a new dock that doubles the power of the Switch when it's docked. Well, here's the other reason I hate that idea, and why I also think Nintendo would never do it. It completely destroys what makes the Switch great and what makes it unique, because that means you'd have to be relying on your docked Nintendo Switch, relying on playing it only on your TV to play some of these great games that would be coming to the Switch. That's where your Grand Theft Auto and your whatever, next BioShock, your next Red Dead Redemption, all of these things, Monster Hunter World, whatever, stuff that maybe you can't play on the Switch currently, you have to play it on your TV because it can only be played docked. So whereas it would be different than this whole idea going out there where only the new Switch Pro would play third-party games, not the old Switch, instead of that segregation, the segregation would be not portable, only on your TV. That's not what the Switch is supposed to be for. The level of segregation that would be doing to people who own the current Switch is nonsense. It's totally bananas to think that that would be what Nintendo would want to do and that that's the way to upgrade the Switch. I think it's the worst idea, personally. And it's just the absolute thing I do not want Nintendo to do. Clearly, if they were going to do any sort of significant upgrade to the Switch, it kind of really is what this tweet and this theory is about. It's just upgrading the Switch as it is, releasing it as a new device. And now, I can understand some of the counter-arguments to this, where, making it a new device means we have to spend another $300 on another device and the one we have now suddenly becomes garbage. Yeah, that's a valid complaint, and it's why I think maybe Nintendo shouldn't necessarily do an upgrade, even though I think they eventually might. The other argument is, well, aren't games coming to the Switch that couldn't otherwise come no matter how you play them, whether they're only docked or whether they're only on a Switch Pro, isn't that better than not getting them at all? And to that I would say, yeah, I guess that's also kind of true. I can't deny the fact that it might be better to get Red Dead Redemption 2 in some fashion than to not have it playable at all on the Nintendo Switch. But I think that overall, the problems we run into here is simply segregating the market. I think it's a risky thing to do now. The way Sony and Microsoft did it, while I don't overall love the fact that they did it, to their credit, it's been done in a way where it doesn't render the old PS4 and Xbox One obsolete and not usable. I can still play Monster Hunter World on my current PS4. Granted, it's only in 30 frames per second and it lags every once in a while, and that part's kind of a shame. And I know that on the Pro, it would be a lot better. It would never lag. It would always be in 60 frames per second, and that would be great. But you know what? It's still possible. I can still do it and enjoy that game and put tons of hours into it on my current PS4, and so it's fine. The way that people are talking about Nintendo upgrading the Switch, whether it's a Switch Pro with exclusive games or a new dock that can play games that the current Switch can't, all of that stuff just completely breaks the very notion of what the Nintendo Switch is supposed to be. I do prefer the upgraded Switch to the upgraded dock overall, but they're still awkward across the board. So there are a couple of ways I would like Nintendo to upgrade the Switch. They're not nearly as fancy and flashy as all of this stuff that we're talking about here, but there are a couple of minor things I would like. One of them would be the Joy-Cons, because I actually like using the Joy-Cons, and I like playing my Switch Portable, and I have to admit that they're not very comfortable. I mean, you know, they're so small, and sometimes so uncomfortable, and I love playing my Switch portably that it becomes frustrating that after playing it for 30 minutes or an hour sometimes portably, I just start to get uncomfortable because they're just these flat, awkward things. And granted, you can buy some accessories now that will make them a little bit more ergonomic and comfortable for your hand. And while I do think that's great, I think it's a shame that they have to be an accessory. So I would love it if there is a way for Nintendo to upgrade the Joy-Cons to make them a little bit more comfortable for the human hand to hold, specifically when it's portable. And maybe that means also changing the shape and the size of the current Switch itself. So a combination of upgrading the ergonomic design of the Switch and the ergonomic design of the Joy-Cons, that would be great. Of course, you kind of run into a problem with how they would fit into this thing, and I feel like they might have to just make an upgraded version of this. And let's say they made new shaped Joy-Cons that you would buy in a package. Well, maybe they have to also sell it with this, the new version of this that makes it so it can all work seamlessly. Because right now, the Joy-Cons can be whatever shape they want, and it'll still fit in the dock, because they stick outside of the dock. To me, it's all about when you're playing with it portably, to tell you the truth, and I would like it if there was a default Nintendo first-party official Joy-Con that was just more comfortable to hold. The other thing I would really like them to improve is the battery life. That's a huge problem for me, because I do play it so often portably in my house. Again, I rarely take it outside of the house, but I do play my Switch portably all the time, even though I can play it on my beautiful TV here. But the battery life, it just does suck. It's a huge problem. I play the thing for an hour or an hour and a half, and suddenly the thing is like half dead or almost dead, and it's like, damn it, Nintendo, the battery life sucks on this thing. I understand why, because the Switch is doing a lot and it plays incredible games portably, so it's not like it breaks the experience for me, but I do find it to be just a shame and a nuisance that I would like to see them improve if they upgraded the Switch in some way. The last main upgrade or improvement I would like to the Switch is a little bit relevant, because about 2 months ago or so, there was a lot of information going around, doing the rounds about this, and I discussed it on a video. Many people discussed it. And it's the fact that the Nintendo Switch gets too damned hot. It just gets too hot, you guys. And obviously, some people have seen a lot of cracks in their Switches because of the heat. And I've always been terrified of that. In the video I made, I showed you guys my setup where I have a fan right here that blows on my Nintendo Switch anytime it's in the dock. I refuse to run that thing in the dock without the fan. I've been doing it that way pretty much since about 2 months or so after it launched, because I was terrified of the warping, terrified of the cracking, terrified of the heat this thing goes through, and it just does get too hot. And when it gets hot, I've tested this on my own, it gets hot right here, which is kind of in the areas, it's like these upper corners that people were seeing their cracks. I think it's over here. And if you look over here, this is where the fan vent is. And there have been times, you guys, where I've taken my Switch off of its dock after playing it for a long time, even with the fan going. To be fair, it's also been when it's been very hot in my room here, but I've taken this thing off, and I'm curious if you guys have done the same thing. And suddenly these fans are on overload. This thing suddenly turns into a jet engine that I'm worried is going to just fly and shoot out of my hands and just shoot through my roof, because these things just kick into overdrive and you can hear it and you can feel so much heat being pumped out of this thing. And it's like, oh my God, this thing gets so hot that these things, they have like a fifth gear that they go into, and suddenly they're just freaking going nuts, man. And it's terrifying to me. This is my $300 Nintendo device that I love and that I spend so much time gaming on and I put a lot of money into. I don't want the thing to break because it was designed to get too hot to play for long periods of time. Like, I hate that about the Switch. It's actually something I actively hate. I have a way around it because of the fan, and I've never run into cracking issues, but it's a big fear I have. And again, months ago, everyone was going through this issue where suddenly Switches were cracking and busting open and warping and bending and being broken just because of heat. And yes, you could change the backplate and make it all good, but isn't that something that we shouldn't have to do? Spend the money and time and effort to change parts of our console because it was designed to get too hot to handle itself? It's just something I don't like. So between the uncomfortable Joy-Cons, the crappy battery life, and the fact that it gets too hot, those are the sort of practical, mechanical improvements I want to the Switch. I'm not worried about graphics or docks or pro Nintendo Switches. That stuff doesn't really interest me. I just want it to be a little bit safer and more comfortable of a device to use. So anyway, that's kind of how I feel about the whole upgrading Switch thing. I don't care about 4K. I don't care about Nintendo Switch Pro. None of that stuff means much to me. But it is certainly interesting. And whether or not there's any truth to these rumors and this conversation that's been blowing up the internet the last 36 hours, I don't really know yet. I do know people who I know and trust who behind the scenes very much do believe that there's something to this. And like I said, I do think before the Switch is done, we will see Nintendo do some kind of upgrade to the Switch. It could be as minor as a Switch Mini. It could be as major as a Switch Pro. I do think Nintendo will do something, but I just don't want them to do it the wrong way. I don't want them to focus on the wrong things. I don't want them to break the Switch experience or compromise the portable nature by making a dock that's super powerful and suddenly games can't run portably, they have to be docked. None of that sits right with me. It feels awkward and uncomfortable, and it feels like a bad business model for Nintendo to do. But hey, I may be wrong. Maybe this stuff is all going to be true and it's going to happen, and maybe it even turns out to be great and it's something that we all love and Nintendo does great and people are happy with it. You never know. I can only share my feelings now while it's a conversation and a theory, and how I feel about it thinking about it being a truth, even though it's not true yet. So anyway, those are my thoughts, and those are my desires for an upgrade to the Switch. What do you guys think? Do you believe these rumors? Do you not believe them? Do you like these ideas of a Switch Pro or an upgraded dock, or do you not like them like I do? Talk about it below. So much to consider here. And yeah, that's going to be it for me. So thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule2Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.